Esther never imagined her life would come down to one moment, a moment standing in the center of her own living room, facing the man she had fallen for, the man who made her heart feel safe and alive again. Yet there she was, staring at Tyrese as his expression collapsed into something heavy, regretful, and impossible to ignore. His voice shook first. "Esther, I hurt someone close to you. Someone you love." Her breath slipped out of her, like she'd been struck. She didn't blink. She didn't speak. She didn't move. It felt as though the air itself paused, waiting for the rest. Tyrese swallowed, unable to hold her gaze. "Was your father?" Everything inside her went silent. Mind, memory, heartbeat, hope, everything. The room blurred around the edges, as if her spirit froze before her body caught up. Her father? The man who had already carried enough pain in his lifetime. The man whose strength shaped her. The man whose quiet struggles she never fully understood. Her knees weakened. Her fingers trembled. Something in her chest tightened so sharply she had to grip the arm of the nearest chair just to stay upright. Because betrayal from a stranger hurts, but betrayal from the man you love destroys. The weight of Tyrese's confession pressed down on her, rushing through her like a cold wind that carried too much truth. She could barely breathe. Yet even in her shock, her mind turned inward, whispering questions that cut deep. Have you ever loved someone so deeply, only to find out they were hiding a truth big enough to break you? Have you ever trusted someone, only to learn they were connected to someone else's suffering? People talk about heartbreak like it's always tied to cheating, lies, or goodbyes. But this was something different. Pain with roots. Pain with history. Pain that reached backward into her father's life and forward into her own heart. Tyrese stepped closer, voice low and trembling. "Esther, there's more you need to hear. If the truth comes out, it won't just destroy me." He hesitated, breath shaking. "It will destroy you, too." A chill washed through her, not because she feared him, but because she feared what the truth might require from her. He wasn't just confessing. He was warning her not to pull away, not to abandon him, but to understand the danger he'd carried into her life long before she knew his name. And in his eyes, she saw something she wasn't ready to face. He wasn't lying. He was terrified. Her mind raced. What truth could possibly threaten them both? What choice had he made in his past that now stretched into her future? And why did her heart still reach for him, even as her world cracked open? If she walked away now, she would leave with questions gnawing at her for the rest of her life. But if she stayed, if she stood beside him, she risked stepping into a storm she never asked for. And yet something inside her whispered that understanding the truth was the only way forward. She lifted her chin, steadying herself, even as her heart throbbed with confusion. This no ordinary love story. This was a collision of past mistakes, hidden choices, and unexpected feelings, one that demanded courage, honesty, and strength from both of them. Stay with me until the end, because what Esther discovers next will change everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and herself. Before we begin, please take a moment to support the channel. Like, comment, and subscribe. It truly helps this story reach more people across YouTube. Welcome to Mr. Michael Stories Hub, where America's greatest stories and life lessons meet creativity and heart. If you're new to the family, we're grateful to have you here. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It helps us bring more unforgettable stories your way. Long before Esther's living room became the place where her heart nearly cracked in half, there was a much simpler morning, one wrapped in Alabama heat, the kind that made the air feel thick even before noon. Back then, her world wasn't complicated. Her days were routine, predictable, grounded. She woke early, left home early, and stopped by the same diner every morning, a little spot where the servers already knew her order before she walked through the front door. It was the kind of place where the chairs squeaked when you sat down, the coffee tasted stronger depending on who brewed it, and the regulars discussed everything from church announcements to who made the best banana pudding in town. Esther loved that diner. It felt familiar, comfortable, safe. That morning, she slid into her regular booth by the window, the one where she could watch cars roll by and listen to the hum of conversations. She didn't expect anything unusual. She didn't expect anyone out of place. She certainly didn't expect the moment that would shift her entire life's direction. The diner door opened, and in walked a man who looked like he'd stepped straight out of a different universe entirely. Tyrese. At that time, she didn't know his name. She only knew that he did not fit the Alabama morning picture. He paused at the entrance, scanning the room like he wasn't sure he belonged anywhere inside. His posture was polite but tense, and his clothes, crisp shirt, tailored slacks, shoes without a speck of dust, made him look dramatically different from the regulars who wore faded denim and work boots. He walked in with confidence, but not the Southern kind, the polished, trained kind. The kind built from boardrooms, private meetings, expensive cars, and a life so far from Alabama's gentle rhythm that he almost looked unreal sitting among biscuit eaters and sweet tea lovers. Esther tried not to stare, but it was impossible not to notice how uncomfortable he looked. He blinked at the menu like he'd never seen one laminated before. He shifted in the seat, like the cushion was too soft or too firm. She couldn't tell, and when the server asked him what he wanted, he requested something nobody in that diner had ever heard during breakfast hours: avocado toast with lemon zest and egg whites only. The entire diner went silent for a second. The server blinked. "Baby, what we got is biscuits." He froze, nodded quickly, and said, "Biscuits will do." Esther nearly laughed into her napkin. It wasn't cruel laughter, more like amusement at watching a man who clearly lived in a completely different world try to blend into hers. Still, something else about him caught her attention. His eyes kept drifting toward her booth, not in a bold or flirtatious way, but like he was searching for an anchor in a place he didn't understand. When he finally approached, it wasn't smooth, wasn't confident. It wasn't like the scenes in movies where the charming stranger walks over with ease. No. Tyrese looked unsure, slight, nervous, almost lost. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Would you mind if I sit? Everywhere else looks full." Esther looked around. Everywhere else was not full. There were at least 4 empty booths and 2 free counter stools. But he stood there, waiting, hopeful, awkward, and strangely sincere. She slid her purse to the side. "You can sit." The relief on his face was immediate. He sat down carefully, almost too carefully, like he was afraid of disturbing the booth or the air around it. Esther tilted her head, studying him. He tried to smile. It was a good smile, just a little shaky. "I'm Tyrese," he said, offering his hand. "Esther," she replied, shaking it lightly. The conversation that followed felt natural, despite how out of place he was. He answered her questions politely, but only in pieces. He revealed little bits about himself, his age, the fact that he was visiting for business, his dislike for the Alabama heat, but he never talked deeply about his life. Still, the charm was there. Not the loud, dramatic kind, the quiet kind, the respectful kind, the kind that made the corners of her mouth lift without meaning to. But as the minutes passed, one thing became clear. He was trying to blend in, but he had no idea how. He used the wrong phrases. He said yes, ma'am, too formally. He held his fork like he'd been raised at a table where elbows were illegal. He looked around the diner like he was studying a foreign place. Esther noticed everything, and though she found him intriguing, a whisper in her spirit nudged her. Something is off. It wasn't danger, wasn't fear. It was simply an awareness, an intuition, sharpened from years of reading people. She could sense when someone carried weight on their shoulders, and Tyrese carried something heavy, something he wasn't ready to name. Still, she didn't pull back. Not yet. Because curiosity, when mixed with unexpected chemistry, becomes powerful. And her story with Tyrese was only just beginning. The diner meeting should have been a one-time moment. 2 strangers crossing paths, sharing a booth, and going their separate ways. Esther assumed that once Tyrese finished whatever business brought him to Alabama, she would never see him again. She certainly didn't expect him to linger in her thoughts afterward, replaying the way he fumbled with the menu or misread the southern warmth in the diner as confusion rather than friendliness. But life, in its unpredictable way, placed them in the same spaces again, first by coincidence, then by something that felt a little too intentional to ignore. 2 days after their first meeting, Esther went to the farmer's market downtown. Walking between stalls filled with fresh fruit, homemade candles, seasonings, and warm laughter that carried across the air. She wasn't looking for anyone. She wasn't dressed up. It was just another Saturday morning in her hometown. Until she heard a familiar voice ask, "Do people really buy all of this before noon?" She turned, and there he was. Tyrese stood in front of a booth selling peaches, wearing a clean shirt that didn't match Alabama casual in the slightest. He was holding a basket awkwardly, like he wasn't sure what to do with it. His eyes lit up when he saw her. "Esther," he said, smiling with a mix of surprise and relief. "Good to see you again." She didn't want to seem too interested, so she lifted a brow. "You stalking me? Now?" The way he froze made her laugh. "I'm kidding," she said quickly. "Relax." "Oh, right. Joking. Got it." He exhaled with the dramatic relief of someone who didn't quite understand Southern teasing yet. They walked together through the market, and Esther found herself amused by how overwhelmed he looked. The sounds, the scents, the casual greetings from strangers, he wasn't used to any of it. Back where he came from, people probably kept conversations crisp and controlled. Here, a stranger might tell you their life story while handing you a tomato. She guided him through stalls like a quiet tour guide, introducing him to flavors he had never tasted. Real local honey, peach jam, fresh-baked bread made by a grandmother who didn't need recipes. He tried everything with curiosity, even if he didn't always understand it. When he tasted boiled peanuts for the first time, he blinked twice and said, "It's warm." "Why is it warm?" "That's how we eat it," she said, laughing. "But peanuts are supposed to be crunchy." "Not here." He took another bite, still confused. "Do people enjoy this?" "Absolutely." He nodded, slowly. "I trust your judgment, but my taste buds need time." His honesty, combined with his struggle to adjust, made him even more endearing. He didn't pretend to know things. He didn't hide his confusion. He just let himself look human, something rare in men who carried themselves with his kind of polish. As they walked, Esther felt something shift, not romantic yet, but something warm and familiar, something that made her want to learn more about him. He was just as curious about her. "You love it here," he said quietly, while they stood near a stand of sunflowers. "It's home," she replied. "Not perfect, but it raised me right." He watched her for a moment, almost studying the way she spoke. "You seem grounded, strong, like you carry your world with certainty." "That's a nice way of saying I'm stubborn," she teased. He smiled softly. "It's a compliment." Their conversations flowed easily, and every moment revealed another layer. His gentle humor, her resilience, his thoughtful questions, her quiet intelligence. It wasn't dramatic or intense. It was simple and real, which made the next discovery even more shocking. Later that afternoon, after buying peaches and laughing about his attempt to negotiate with a vendor who didn't negotiate, Tyrese accidentally dropped his phone. When he bent to pick it up, Esther noticed something. His lock screen flashed a glimpse of a news headline with his name attached to it, and a number, a very large number. She didn't say anything immediately, but when they walked toward the parking lot, she finally asked, "Tyrese, what exactly do you do?" He hesitated, just for a second, a small pause, barely noticeable. "Unless you had strong intuition," which she did. "I run a business. he replied. What kind of business? A few things. Investments. Companies. I shift my attention where it's needed. She crossed her arms. Tyrese, you're not just running a business. That headline on your screen had your net worth in bold print. He froze. You saw that? I'm observant. He looked down, almost embarrassed. I don't like talking about money. People treat me differently when they know. She studied him quietly. A billionaire standing in the Alabama heat, confused by boiled peanuts, wearing a shirt too fancy for a farmer's market, and still trying to blend into her world without knowing how. You could have told me, she said gently. I didn't want that to be the reason you talked to me. It wouldn't have been. He looked at her with relief in his eyes. But Esther wasn't fully relaxed. Wealth didn't scare her, but secrets did. Something in her spirit whispered again, calm but firm. Be careful. Watch him. Something is off. Not dangerous, not harmful, but hidden. Still, she didn't walk away, because something about Tyrese drew her in. Not the money, not the polish, not the mystery, but the softness he carried beneath all of that, and the feeling that their connection was only beginning to unfold. As the days passed, Esther noticed a shift in Tyrese, subtle at first, then gradually becoming impossible to ignore. Their connection remained warm, gentle, and unexpectedly natural. But beneath that softness, something in him tightened, something unspoken, something that didn't match the polished confidence he tried to project. It began with small things. The first sign appeared when someone dropped a tray at the farmer's market. The clatter echoed across the pavement, a sharp, sudden sound that startled a few people. But Tyrese reacted differently. He flinched so hard he nearly dropped the bag in his hand. His eyes darted toward the source of the noise as if expecting a threat, not a simple accident. Hey, Esther said softly, touching his arm. It's just a tray. He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Right. Sorry. Didn't mean to jump. He had jumped. Not like a man caught off guard, but like someone who lived on edge. The second sign revealed itself at a local restaurant later that week. They were seated outside, enjoying a quiet evening, when a motorcycle rumbled down the street. The sound wasn't unusually loud, but Tyrese stiffened instantly. His shoulders tensed. His jaw tightened. His gaze shot over his shoulder with the precision of someone tracking danger. Do you know him? Esther joked lightly, trying to ease the shift in his mood. He shook his head quickly. No, just habit. A habit of reacting to harmless noise. A habit of scanning crowds, even in peaceful places. A habit of behaving as if someone might appear at any moment. Esther didn't pressure him. Not yet. But her spirit stirred again, cautious and alert, The third sign came the following afternoon. They were walking through a small Alabama park, enjoying the shade of tall trees and the warm breeze. Tyrese seemed distracted, his eyes moving too often toward people passing by. He wasn't staring. He was assessing, observing, tracking. At one point, a group of teenagers dashed past them laughing loudly. Tyrese's entire body tensed, as if bracing for something. His hand instinctively reached for his pocket, not aggressively, but protectively. "Tyrese," Esther said gently, "are you okay?" He looked at her, breathing just a little too fast. "Yeah? Just thinking." But it wasn't thinking. It was fear, wearing the mask of thought. By the end of the week, the signs were no longer subtle. They formed a pattern. He checked behind him every few minutes. He paused in doorways before entering rooms. When someone spoke loudly nearby, his shoulders rose slightly, and his gaze shifted to identify the source. Even when sitting still, his knee bounced with tension he couldn't hide. Wasn't paranoia. It wasn't dramatics. It was a man carrying something heavy. Esther watched him closely, not judging, not assuming, but noticing. Her intuition had always served her well, and now it hummed with certainty. Whatever he was dealing with did not start yesterday, or last week, or last month. This was long-standing, deep-rooted, the kind of burden that shaped a person's instincts. One evening, while they sat on a bench outside her home, she finally asked a question that had been lingering in her mind. "Tyrese, do you feel safe here?" He froze, not visibly, but inwardly. She could feel it. His breath caught, his jaw tightened. "Yes," he replied too quickly. She didn't press. She simply watched him, giving him space to correct himself. He sighed. "I'm trying to," he whispered. That truth, small but honest, sat between them like a confession he wasn't ready to expand on. The internal conflict within him grew clearer by the day. In moments when he laughed or listened to her talk about her childhood, he appeared calm, almost peaceful. But calmness never lasted. A sudden noise, an unfamiliar face, or a crowded room pulled him right back into whatever fear lived beneath his composed exterior. Esther didn't know the details yet, but she knew this with certainty. Tyrese was carrying a past that refused to stay buried. And if she continued falling for him, as she quietly was, she would eventually collide with that past too. For now, though, she simply stayed by his side, watching the cracks form in the perfect image he tried to maintain, knowing that one day soon those cracks would split wide open. The afternoon sun hung low over the Alabama park, warming the tops of the trees and casting calm shadows over the walking paths. Esther and Tyrese moved quietly beside each other. The kind of quiet that didn't feel uncomfortable, just thoughtful. She'd grown used to studying him in these moments, noticing the way his eyes scanned the distance, how his shoulders never fully relaxed, how he seemed caught between wanting peace and expecting the opposite. Today, however, something in him felt even tighter than usual. They walked past families spread across picnic blankets, couples strolling hand in hand, and kids chasing each other with the kind of joy that belonged only to summer afternoons. Everything around them looked normal, ordinary, safe. But Tyrese wasn't safe. Not inside himself. He paused every few steps, eyes drifting toward people entering the park. His breathing seemed shallow, his hands slightly chilled despite the heat. Esther slowed her pace and watched him carefully, her heart whispering warnings she couldn't yet name. They reached a quieter area where oak trees arched overhead, their branches swaying lightly. Esther stopped walking and turned toward him. "You're tense today," she said softly. He forced a small smile. "Just thinking." "You're always thinking," she replied. "But is different." Before he could respond, a loud slam broke through the park. Sharp, sudden, startling. A car door. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening. But Tyrese reacted instantly. His entire body jerked. He inhaled sharply. His eyes widened in raw panic. And then he grabbed Esther's hand. Not gently, not romantically, but instinctively, like someone trying to protect a person from danger they couldn't yet see. "Tyrese!" she exclaimed, startled by the intensity in his grip. He didn't answer. His gaze shot toward the sound, analyzing every movement near the parking lot. His breathing grew uneven, almost trembling. His pulse hammered through the hand holding hers. "Hey," she whispered firmly, grounding him. "Look at me." It took him a moment, but he forced his eyes toward her. Fear still flickered behind them. Real, sharp, unhidden. "That was just a car door," she said gently. "Nothing more." He blinked, swallowing hard. I know. Sometimes I react before I think." "You react like you're expecting something bad to happen," she said quietly. He didn't deny it. The silence stretched between them. Not peaceful this time, but heavy. Esther stepped closer, her expression soft but serious. "Tyrese, this isn't just stress. This is fear, and it's getting worse." He shut his eyes briefly, as if trying to steady himself. She continued, voice calm but honest. "You can't keep pretending everything is fine. I see you, even when you try to hide it." His jaw tightened. His shoulders rose slightly. She could see the war going on inside him. "Tyrese," she whispered, "what are you afraid of?" He opened his eyes slowly, meeting hers with a vulnerability she had never seen in him before. "Not the gentle kind, the wounded kind. I care about you," he said softly. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give. Right now." Esther exhaled, frustration mixing with concern. "You're not telling me something. And whatever it is, it's eating you alive." He looked away, gaze drifting toward the trees. "Don't want you involved." "I already am," she replied. "Every time you flinch, every time you look over your shoulder, every time something shakes you, I feel it too." His breathing hitched slightly. She touched his arm gently. "Tyrese, talk to me." He hesitated, struggled, fought with the truth pressing against him. And then he finally said the words that shifted everything. "You should be careful with me." Her heart stopped for a moment. "What does that mean?" she asked, voice steady but tight. He swallowed. "It means I'm not the kind of man you think I am. There are things about my life, things I haven't told you, that could put you in situations you don't deserve." She stared at him, the weight of his confession settling over her. "Tyrese," she murmured, "I'm not someone who runs from hard truths. You should," he whispered. His voice cracked, just slightly, enough to reveal how much fear he carried beneath his polished appearance. For the first time since meeting him, Esther felt something shift inside her. Not her feelings, but her understanding of him. This wasn't a man hiding arrogance or pride. This was a man hiding damage. A man who feared the consequences of letting someone get too close. She took a slow breath. "Whatever you're dealing with, I need you to be honest with me." He looked at her as if honesty was the very thing he feared most. "Esther," he said softly, "once I tell you the truth, your life won't be the same." Her heart clenched. She didn't respond. Not yet. Too many emotions collided at once. He stepped back slightly, releasing her hand with visible reluctance. "I'm trying to protect you," he whispered, "even if doesn't look like it." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The park felt too quiet now, the breeze too soft, the sunlight too bright for the heaviness settling between them. Finally, Esther drew in a deep breath. "Tyrese," she said gently, "I need clarity, not fear." He looked down, unable to answer. Their relationship didn't break in that moment, but it changed. Something fragile, something unspoken, something heavy settled between them, marking the emotional turning point neither of them could ignore. If you're still here and following this journey, take a moment to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us tell more meaningful stories like this one. The day after the park incident felt heavier than the Alabama humidity pressing against the windows of Esther's home. Sleep hadn't come easily. That night, every time she closed her eyes, Tyrese's voice echoed in her mind. "You should be careful with me. Your life won't be the same once I tell you the truth." Fear didn't shake her. Uncertainty did. She wasn't a woman who ran from difficult conversations, and she wasn't ready to let emotional fog dictate her next move. So when morning came, she made a decision with the firmness of someone raised on Sunday sermons and hard-learned lessons. She needed answers, and she knew exactly where to find him. Diner. It had become a quiet, unofficial meeting point for them, one Tyrese seemed to gravitate toward whenever he needed a moment to think. Esther drove there with a steady heart, even though her thoughts churned beneath the calm surface. She wasn't angry. She wasn't hurt. Not yet. She was simply determined to understand what had driven him to that moment in the park. As she stepped inside, the familiar smell of biscuits and coffee greeted her. The room buzzed with soft conversation, forks clinking against plates, and the low hum of country radio. And there, sitting alone in their usual booth, was Tyrese. His posture was different today. Shoulders slightly lowered, hands wrapped around a mug he hadn't touched, gaze fixed on the table as if he were fighting a battle within himself. He didn't see her at first, but when he finally lifted his head and their eyes met, something flickered across his face, relief mixed with dread, like a man who hoped she would come and feared it at the same time. Esther walked over, each step steady. She paused beside the booth. "Can I sit?" she asked. He nodded without hesitation. "Please." She slid into the seat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't cold. It was honest. A space waiting to be filled with truth. Tyrese finally exhaled, voice low. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me." "I needed to," she replied. "Running from things has never been my way." He gave a small, tired smile. "I know. It's one of the reasons I admire you." His compliment didn't distract her. "Not today." "Tyrese," she said gently, "what happened in the park wasn't normal. You reacted like you were bracing for something. That wasn't just fear. It was a memory." He looked down again. His fingers tightened around the mug. "I'm not proud of how I acted. I'm not judging how you acted," she said softly. "I'm trying to understand what caused it." He hesitated. She could see the conflict rising in him, guilt pressing against the part of him that craved relief. Confession warred with self-protection. Finally, he set the mug aside and looked her directly in the eyes. "I made a mistake years ago," he began softly. "A big one. And I've been trying to outrun the consequences ever since." Esther leaned in slightly, giving him her full attention. "What kind of mistake?" "The kind that changes people's lives," he whispered. "Not through violence, not through anything physical, but through decisions I made without fully understanding who they would hurt." She let the words settle. He continued, "I was young, trying to prove myself, trying to show my father I had the skill to carry his legacy. I pushed a project forward, one I didn't fully evaluate. I didn't realize the risks. I didn't see how it would affect the people whose lives depended on the land involved." Esther's heart tightened. "So people were hurt because of you?" He nodded, slowly. "Yes, someone suffered because of my choices. And the worst part is, they took the blame for it when things went wrong. I didn't understand the full truth until it was too late." "So you walked around with the success," she said quietly, "while someone else carried the fallout." He closed his eyes, voice trembling slightly. "Exactly." The diner's soft noises faded, leaving only the weight between them. "Tyrese," she said gently, "mistakes don't define a person. What they do afterward does. He opened his eyes and met her gaze again, this time with a sorrow far deeper than fear. "I tried to fix it," he said, quietly, carefully. "I've spent years trying to help from a distance, but I couldn't reveal myself. If I had, more people would have been dragged into it." "Maturity means facing what you caused," she replied. "Guilt keeps you stuck. Responsibility moves you forward." His throat tightened. "You make it sound easier than it is." "It's never easy," she said softly. "But it's necessary." Tyrese looked down again, struggling with the weight of his own honesty. "There's more," he whispered. The words hung in the air like a soft warning. Not loud, not dramatic, just truth on the edge of breaking open. Esther's breath steadied. "I figured there would be." His eyes lifted, and in them she saw a mixture of fear and readiness. This was only the first layer, and the deeper truth, the one that would shake her world, still waited in the shadows of his past. The drive back to Esther's house was quiet, too quiet. Tyrese sat in the passenger seat with his hands clasped tightly, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. Esther didn't rush him, didn't force words out of him. She sensed he was standing at the edge of a truth he'd been avoiding for years, and pushing him too hard might cause him to retreat again. When they finally stepped inside her home, the familiar warmth of the space contrasted sharply with the tension he carried through the door. Esther closed the door behind them, gently, then turned to him. "Tyrese," she said softly, "whatever's weighing on you, this is the moment to let me in." He stood in the middle of her living room, shoulders rising and falling with uneven breaths. She could see the battle in his eyes, the battle between fear and honesty, between the desire to protect her and the need to stop running from his past. After several moments, he finally nodded. "I owe the truth," he whispered. "All of it?" Esther stepped closer, giving him a silent reassurance. She wasn't going anywhere. Tyrese inhaled deeply. "Years ago, I was part of a major business project. Something big. Something my father pushed me into. I wanted to impress him. I wanted to prove myself. And in that hunger for approval, I didn't pay attention to what I should have questioned." He paused, brows tightening. The project involved land acquisition and environmental assessments. On paper, everything looked clean, profitable, safe. But the reality was different. Corners were cut. Reports were adjusted. People in charge hid risks that could affect entire communities. Esther listened without interrupting. "I was the one presenting those reports," he continued quietly. "I believed what I was told. I didn't dig deeper. I didn't question why certain data didn't match. I didn't realize someone was altering documents behind the scenes." He stared at his hands, as if ashamed to even look up. When the damage finally happened, someone lost their livelihood, their stability, their peace. And instead of taking responsibility, the company redirected the blame. Esther's chest tightened. Redirected. How? They pinned everything on the person who tried to expose what was happening, he said bitterly. The one honest voice in the entire project. They painted them as incompetent, as a troublemaker. They ruined their reputation. Her breath hitched, but she stayed silent, letting him continue. I wanted to speak up, he said. I wanted to say that the fault wasn't theirs, but my father shut it down. His exact words were, "If you open your mouth, you'll bring this family down." Esther's jaw clenched. He made it clear, Tyrese continued, that I represented more than myself, that my silence protected our name. And from that moment on, I wasn't just an employee. I was a shield, a puppet, watched closely, managed, controlled. He met her gaze for the first time since they entered the house. They monitored my communication. They tracked my travel. Anytime I tried to help the person who took the fall, even anonymously, I received warnings, phone calls, messages reminding me to stay aligned. The word "stay aligned" carried a quiet threat. Esther felt a cold ripple run through her. They followed you here, didn't they? I don't know for sure, he whispered, but someone has been watching my movements. Every trip back to Alabama, someone knew. My attempts to make things right did not go unnoticed. Esther's heart sank. Tyrese. He stepped closer, eyes filled with regret. I came back to Alabama to understand the real impact, to see how far the consequences had reached. But the closer I got to the truth, the more resistance I faced. Silence filled the room again, a silence carrying warning, a silence carrying guilt, a silence carrying the hint of approaching danger. Tyrese dropped his gaze. I never meant for you to get caught in this. Esther approached him slowly. But I am now. And you didn't pull me into this. I chose to stand here. His throat tightened. There's something else you need to know, he whispered. Something that will change everything. A soft knock suddenly hit the door, so faint it was almost mist. Stiffened, Tyrese's eyes widened. Danger had arrived, sooner than either of them expected. The soft knock at the door faded into silence, but its effect lingered like a tremor beneath the floorboards. Dead didn't move right away. She stood near Tyrese, eyes locked onto the door while her mind raced through possibilities. It could have been nothing, a neighbor, a mistake, a delivery, but the look on Tyrese's face said everything she needed to know. He believed someone had found him, and that fear pushed Esther into a place she hadn't expected to be so soon. Caught between her instinct to protect herself and the undeniable empathy pulling her toward him, Tyrese stepped back slowly, shaking his head as if trying to clear a storm of thoughts. I shouldn't have come here, he whispered. I never should have stepped into your world with all of this following me. Tyrese, she said softly, still watching the door. He moved farther away from it, breathing heavily. It's my fault if anything happens. I should have kept my distance. I should have stayed away from you. His words sliced through her heart, not because of fear, but because of the sincerity behind them. He wasn't being dramatic. He wasn't exaggerating. He truly believed he was a danger to her life, her peace, her home, and that terrified her more than the knock itself. She turned to him. "Stop! Don't start shutting down now. You don't understand," he said, voice trembling. "The deeper this goes, the more you risk without even knowing it." Her chest tightened. For the first time since meeting him, she felt a conflict rise so sharply inside her that she didn't know which direction her heart wanted to run. On one hand, she wanted to step away. She wanted to protect her home, her peace, her father, her future. On the other hand, she saw the man standing in front of her, the man who had clearly been fighting alone for far too long, the man who carried more guilt than pride, the man who didn't hide behind wealth or arrogance, the man who, despite everything, looked at her like she was the only safe place he'd found in years. Effie pulled her closer. Fear held her still. The collision between the two left her breathless. Tyrese raked a hand through his hair. "I've been carrying this weight for so long that I forgot what it feels like to simply breathe. And now that you know pieces of it, I'm terrified of losing the one good thing that found me." Esther blinked, stunned by the rawness of his words. "Good thing?" He looked up at her, eyes glassy with emotion he could no longer hide. "You?" Her breath caught. He took a step toward her, slow, deliberate, as if moving too fast might break the moment. "I didn't expect to feel anything when I came here. I wasn't looking for anyone, let alone someone who could make me rethink my entire life. But every time I'm with you, the noise quiets, the pressure eases, and I feel like I'm allowed to be human again." Her heart trembled. "I'm falling for you, Esther," he confessed, voice soft but unshakably sincere. "Not because you're kind or beautiful, though you are, but because you look at me like I'm more than the mistakes I made. You see the parts of me I've been trying to bury, and that scares me, because I don't want my past to ruin what we've started." Esther closed her eyes for a moment, overwhelmed. She cared for him too much, too quickly, and it scared her. Love was one thing. Falling into a connection laced with danger was another entirely. Her upbringing taught her to value her safety, her peace, her spirit, but it also taught her compassion, loyalty, and the strength to discern people's true intentions. And standing before her, Tyrese wasn't a monster. He wasn't a threat to her. He was a man trying desperately to rebuild something inside himself. When she opened her eyes, he was still watching her, waiting, hoping, afraid. "Tyrese," she said quietly, "I'm not blind. I see you. I see the fear, the guilt, the heart underneath all of that. But I'm also human. I'm torn. I don't know whether to lean in or step back. I want to understand you, but I'm scared of what comes next." He nodded, slowly. "I don't blame you." "This a lot," she admitted. "Didn't plan for any of this." "Neither did I." He took another step closer, his voice gentle. "I don't expect you to choose anything right now. I don't expect forgiveness or trust or promises. I needed you to know how I feel." Their breath mingled in the quiet room. The tension shifted, not heavy, not fearful, but intimate. Esther felt the vulnerability between them rising like a tide. Soft, steady, impossible to ignore. She didn't reach for him, but she didn't step away either. Their closeness became its own answer. Finally, she whispered, "I need clarity before I can give my heart freely." He nodded, eyes soft. "And I owe you the truth, the whole truth." The moment lingered, warm and fragile, pulling them closer, not with certainty, but with honesty. And Esther realized something crucial. Fear didn't always mean walk away. Sometimes fear meant move carefully. Sometimes fear meant this matters. Tyrese took a gentle breath. "There's more I need to tell you. The part that explains everything." Thao steadied herself. She wasn't ready, but she was willing. And with Tyrese, willingness was the beginning. The tension between them settled into a fragile quiet, like the pause before a storm makes its presence known. Esther stood in her living room with her breath steadying, her heart slowly untangling the mix of fear, tenderness, and uncertainty rising inside her. Tyrese remained only a few feet away, his expression caught somewhere between dread and determination. "Tyrese," she said softly, "you told me there's more. I'm listening." He nodded, though the movement looked heavy, as if the next truth weighed twice as much as the first. He took a slow step back and sank onto her couch, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Esther didn't sit. Not yet. She needed to be grounded, to brace herself for whatever came next. "When I first told you about the project, I didn't lie," he began, "but didn't tell you everything either." Esther crossed her arms gently. "I suspected as much." He inhaled deeply, almost shakily. "The project that went wrong. It wasn't just any piece of land. It wasn't just some random community I harmed." Her heart tightened. He lifted his head slightly. "It happened here. In Alabama." A chill ran through her. Not fear, but recognition. Something in her spirit had whispered this long before he said the words aloud. But hearing it confirmed made her pulse throb. "Here?" she repeated quietly. "Yes." His voice was rough. "Not in this town, but close enough that it affected people you would consider your own." She swallowed hard. "People? Like who?" He hesitated, and the hesitation itself felt like a confession. "The decisions I made," he continued, "the reports I signed off on, they led to harm for someone who lived not far from where you grew up. Someone who had no protection, no wealth, no power. Someone who fought back. But no one believed them. Esther felt her throat tighten. She didn't sit. She didn't move. Her body knew the truth was nearing, even if her mind wasn't ready to grasp it. "Tyrese," she said softly. "Who suffered?" He closed his eyes briefly. His jaw flexed, as if the words he needed to release were knives cutting their way out. "In the beginning," he said, "I thought the impact was contained. I thought the damage was limited and temporary. But when I came back to Alabama for the first time, years after the project, I saw how wrong I was." He looked up at her. Then there was no hiding left in his eyes. This wasn't just about reports or money or bad decisions. People lost everything, Esther. Their land, their income, their sense of stability. She felt a rush of heat in her chest. "You said someone took the fall." "They'd," he whispered. "Someone who tried to stop the project. Someone who spoke out. Someone who was silenced and painted as unreliable." Her pulse hammered. Every revelation pulled another thread in her heart. "But what does that have to do with me?" she asked, though she already knew the direction the truth was pointing toward. Slowly, painfully, inevitably, Tyrese exhaled. "Because the deeper truth is, my role was bigger than I admitted. I wasn't just someone who signed off on reports. I was the face of the project. I defended decisions I should have questioned. And when the harm spread, the person at the center of the fallout," he stopped. Esther finally sat, but only because her legs demanded it. She perched on the edge of the chair across from him, staring at him with a mix of dread and determination. "Finish it," she whispered. Tyrese swallowed hard. "The person who suffered the most, the one who tried to fight back, lives in this community. Someone connected to you." Her heart slammed inside her chest. Connected. Suffered. Alabama. Pieces of her memory flickered. Moments from her childhood, stories her father told, the quiet sorrow he carried during certain years, the way financial stress suddenly changed their home, the days he came home, looking defeated, for reasons he never fully explained. "Tyree!" Her voice cracked. He shook his head, almost pleading. "Esther, I swear on everything. I didn't know when I met you. I didn't even recognize the connection until weeks after." Her breath grew uneven. "You're telling me," she whispered, "that I grew up near the consequences of your mistake? That someone I may know was harmed?" He nodded slowly. She stared at him, feeling her heart shift, tremble, brace itself. "Who?" she asked. He lowered his head. "There's something else you need to know," he whispered. The words landed like a final warning, heavy, imminent, unavoidable. Esther felt her entire world tilt. She wasn't ready, but she was seconds away from learning a truth that would change everything. The weight in the room thickened after Tyrese whispered, "There's something else you need to know." His voice trembled, barely carrying across the space, yet it struck Esther with a force she couldn't ignore. She stood still, trying to steady herself, but her breath felt uneven, cautious, preparing for a truth she sensed was close enough to touch. "Tell me," she said quietly, though her heart pounded hard enough to shake her. Tyrese looked at her with eyes filled with a kind of sorrow that didn't come from guilt alone. This was regret carved deep into his spirit. He swallowed hard, running his hand slowly over his jaw, as if searching for courage he'd misplaced long ago. "Esther," his voice cracked. "I hurt your father." The words hit her like a blow directly to the chest. She froze completely. Her breath left her in a sharp, painful rush. Her knees weakened, and she reached blindly for the back of the chair, just to keep herself upright. She stared at him, but her mind couldn't process the sound of the words, even though she had heard them clearly. "My father?" she whispered. Tyrese looked down, shame shaping every angle of his expression. "Yes." Her palms grew cold. Her throat tightened. The room felt smaller, the air thinner, as though her world were shrinking into a single point of disbelief. "You're telling me you," she said, her voice trembling, "had something to do with what happened to my father?" "With everything he went through." He nodded slowly. "Not directly." "Don't!" she snapped, her voice cracking sharply through the room. "Don't you dare soften it. You just said you hurt him." He closed his eyes. "I didn't know it was him. Not then. I didn't know the person who suffered the most from that project was your father." Esther took a step back, shaking her head. "Stop talking. Just stop." She placed her hand over her mouth, trying to hold back the tremor in her voice. "Do you understand what you're saying? Do you understand what my father went through?" "Yes," Tyrese whispered. "I've seen it." "You've seen it?" She let out a shaky breath, halfway between a sob and a laugh. "You've seen it? My father nearly lost everything. Our home, his reputation, his sanity. You don't get to summarize that with 'I've seen it.'" Her voice rose with the weight of years she never knew she carried. "You don't understand the nights he sat in the living room staring into space, because he didn't know how he would take care of us. You don't understand how embarrassed he felt when people stopped believing him. You don't understand how hard it was to watch the strongest man I knew crumble inside himself." Tyrese winced, every word slicing through him. "Esther, I'm so sorry." "No," she shouted, tears spilling now. "Don't apologize like this is some small mistake. You chose that project. You stood in front of cameras and defended it. You let someone else take the fall. Someone who was telling the truth." "I didn't know," he insisted, stepping forward. "I swear I didn't know the depth of the damage. I didn't know it was your father. But you knew someone was suffering." She cried. "You knew someone was screaming for help, and no one listened." He stopped moving. His chest rose and fell with the heaviness of a man cracking open. "Yes," he said quietly, "I knew someone was suffering, and I didn't speak up in time." Her tears flowed freely now, each one fueled by anger she couldn't contain. "My father lost more than money," she whispered fiercely. "He lost trust. He lost pieces of himself. And now you're standing here telling me you were part of that pain." Tyrese bowed his head. Yes, the betrayal erupted inside her. Sharp, raw, and consuming. How could you let me get close to you, knowing this? She demanded. How could you look at me, laugh with me, stand beside me, all while holding this inside? He lifted his eyes, devastated. Because I fell for you before I knew. And when I realized the truth, I was terrified you'd never look at me again. Her voice broke. You were right. The silence that followed felt like the collapse of something once hopeful. Esther turned away, her whole body trembling. The truth didn't just hurt. It split her open, because love mixed with betrayal didn't simply ache. It destroyed. Esther stood with her back turned, her arms wrapped around herself as if trying to hold the pieces of her heart together. The room felt too still, too fragile, as though speaking too loudly might shatter whatever strength she was clinging to. Tyrese stood only a few steps behind her, but the emotional distance between them felt like an entire world. Stir! His voice came out strained, thick with regret. Please, let me explain. She didn't turn around. She didn't trust herself to. Her breath trembled each time she tried to steady it. Explain? She whispered bitterly. Explain how you destroyed my father's life, and then walked into mine like you were harmless. He took a slow, painful breath. I didn't walk into your life knowing. I swear I didn't. She squeezed her eyes shut as tears fell again. But once you found out, why didn't you leave? Because I couldn't, he admitted, the confession spilling out with helpless honesty. By the time I realized the connection, I had already fallen for you. Something in her chest twisted sharply. She shook her head, refusing the softness rising inside her. Don't say that right now, she whispered. I can't handle that right now. Tyrese stepped forward, careful, almost pleading. You deserve the truth, all of it. Even if it breaks everything between us, even if it makes you walk away. She slowly turned around, tears streaking down her cheeks, her voice trembling. Then tell me why my father had to suffer while you continued climbing. Tell me why he had to lose so much while you gained from the same disaster. He lowered his head, guilt washing over him. Because I was ignorant. Because I trusted the people above me. Because I wanted my father to see me as capable. Because I believed the reports placed in front of me instead of questioning them. He looked up, eyes red. Because I was weak. Esther felt another tear fall. She wasn't ready to forgive him, not even close. But she felt the sincerity in his voice, the weight of someone who had carried guilt for far too long. I didn't know the damage stretched this far, he continued. The corporate team hid everything. They made sure the blame fell on the one voice that tried to expose the truth. Your father wasn't just ignored. He was silenced, branded as unreasonable, treated unfairly. And his voice broke. I let it happen. Her breath shuddered. You let it happen, she echoed, pain threading through her words. Yes, he whispered, and I've never forgiven myself for it. Not once. Every step of my success has been poisoned with guilt. Every accolade reminded me of someone who suffered because of a choice I didn't question. Esther wiped her face slowly, still trembling. Do you know how hard it was watching him try to rebuild himself? Watching him question his own worth? Watching people look at him like he was unstable, when all he wanted was justice. Tyrese's eyes filled again. I know now, and it tears me apart every day. She took a deep breath, steadying her voice. Then why didn't you come forward sooner? Why not fix it when it mattered most? He inhaled deeply, shoulders heavy. Because I was scared. Because the company monitored every move I made. Because I would have risked the livelihoods of innocent employees. Because my father threatened to destroy anyone who exposed the truth. And because I didn't know how to undo what I'd done without causing more harm. Esther stared at him, astonished by the honesty spilling out, by the way the layers of his guilt kept unfolding. He took another step closer. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm asking for a chance to make things right now. Fully, openly, no matter the cost to me. A long silence followed. Esther's anger still burned, but something inside her shifted, not softened, but clarified. She could see the torment in his eyes, the regret etched into his expression, the way he held his posture, like a man carrying years of spiritual weight. She was falling apart. Yes, but she wasn't blind. This man wasn't standing before her proud or defensive. He wasn't making excuses. He wasn't protecting himself. He was breaking in front of her, piece by piece, truth by truth, and against her will, against her pain, against her sense of betrayal. She saw his humanity. His mistake had caused harm. His silence had caused damage, but his remorse was unmistakable. Her tears softened as she whispered, "Tyrese, I don't know what to feel right now." He nodded slowly. "You don't have to decide anything. Not today. Not tomorrow. Just let me do what I should have done years ago." She looked at him through blurred vision, her voice barely above a breath. "What is that?" "Tell the truth," he said quietly. "All of it." Another silence followed. Heavy, yes, but no longer suffocating. Esther exhaled shakily, and for the first time since the reveal, she allowed herself to breathe without collapsing. She wasn't ready to forgive. She wasn't ready to trust again. But she could acknowledge something real. She saw his remorse. She saw his brokenness. She saw the man beneath the mistake. That mattered. If this story has pulled you in so far, take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep delivering powerful stories that touch the heart. The quiet in the room felt less like silence and more like the fragile breath between two changing worlds. Esther had cried until her tears dried on her cheeks, leaving faint, warm trails behind. Tyrese stood a few steps away from her, posture humble, uncertain, waiting for anything, her decision, her silence, her anger, her heartbreak. He wasn't demanding forgiveness or expecting comfort. He stood like a man ready to accept whatever truth she handed him. When Esther finally spoke, her voice wasn't loud or harsh. It was steady, worn, but steady. "You said you want to make things right," she murmured softly, keeping her eyes lowered. "What does that actually mean for you?" Tyrese took a slow breath, shoulders rising and falling with the weight of everything he was preparing to surrender. "It means I go public," he said. "I expose the executives, the contracts, the false reports, the way Father was treated. I reveal every detail, no matter the consequence to me." Her eyes lifted slightly, watching him with a mixture of caution and disbelief. "You're talking about destroying your career. I know you'll lose your company. I know you'll face legal battles, social backlash, everything. I know, Esther," he whispered gently. "All of that means nothing compared to what I should have done years ago. I've lived with the guilt of silence long enough. It's time I open my mouth and tell the world exactly what happened. No filters, no excuses." She stared at him, searching for any sign of hesitation. She found none. His expression held a quiet resolve she hadn't seen in him before, something firm, grounded, unshaken. Not the man who flinched at loud sounds. Not the man who checked over his shoulder. Not the man trembling with anxiety. This, a man who had made a decision. A hard one, a costly one, and he meant every word. "Why now?" she asked softly. "Why not last year? Or the year before that? Why wait until after everything between us happened?" His answer came without pause. "Because I finally have a reason to be brave." The room stilled. Esther's breath hitched slightly, not from pain this time, but from the sincerity in his tone. "Tyrese!" He stepped closer, not too close, but enough to let his honesty reach her fully. "You showed me who I was becoming. You showed me what I've been avoiding. I fell for you, Esther, not because you were gentle with me, but because you are strong enough to face the truth, even when it hurts. You deserve a man who lives with integrity, not one who hides behind fear." She swallowed slowly, her heartbeat uneven, but calmer than before. "And you think exposing everything will fix what happened?" "No," he admitted softly. "Nothing can undo the past, but it can stop the lies. It can clear your father's name. It can give him the dignity he was denied. And it can show you who I truly am. Not the man I was back then, but the man I'm choosing to become now." Esther exhaled deeply, holding her elbows as she processed his words. Part of her still ached with betrayal. Part of her was scared of what the public exposure might bring. Part of her wondered whether she could withstand the emotional weight that came with standing beside him. But another part, a quieter, deeper part, recognized something rare in front of her. A man ready to sacrifice everything for truth. A man willing to lose his wealth, status, and entire public identity for what was right. A man she wasn't ready to love fully again yet, but also wasn't willing to abandon. She stepped toward him slowly. "If you do this," she whispered, "there's no going back. I know it'll be messy. I know, and people won't believe you at first." "They don't have to," he murmured. "I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing it for your father and for you." Her breath shook, and she looked away for a moment, collecting her thoughts. When she turned back, her eyes held a quiet strength of their own. "I'm not promising forgiveness," she said softly. "I'm not promising that everything between us will heal overnight." But his heart lifted at the word. "But I won't let you face this alone." Tyrese inhaled sharply, as though the air itself restored a piece of his soul. "Esther, are you sure?" "No," she admitted honestly, "but I'm willing. And sometimes willingness matters more than certainty." He nodded slowly, accepting her truth with gratitude deeper than words could carry. A fragile peace settled between them. Not perfect, not complete, but real. They sat together on the couch, not touching, but close enough for their breaths to share the same space. The tension softened. The pain quieted, and for a moment they simply existed. Two broken hearts choosing courage over abandonment. Tyrese finally whispered, "We'll need evidence. Documents, statements, everything." Esther nodded. "Then let's prepare for whatever's coming." A storm waited outside this living room. Public exposure, corporate retaliation, emotional fallout, but for the first time, neither of them felt alone in facing it. Their bond wasn't healed, but it was strengthened, deepened, anchored by honesty rather than fear. Redemption had begun. The morning after Tyrese decided to expose everything arrived, with a haze that hung low over Alabama skies. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but Esther could already feel the weight of the day pressing against her chest. She stood at her window, looking out over her quiet neighborhood, where porch lights flickered against the early dawn. Nothing looked different on the outside, but everything inside her had shifted. Behind her, Tyrese sat at her dining table, surrounded by folders, documents, printed emails, and handwritten notes, evidence he had kept hidden for years. He combed through each sheet with shaking hands, his anxiety clear in the way he exhaled too often, the way his fingers trembled slightly each time he picked up a new page. "You okay?" she asked softly, still standing by the window. He paused, lowered his hands, and looked up. "I'm trying to be." She nodded slowly. "Today's going to be hard." "I know." He swallowed. "But it's time." She walked over, pulled out a chair, and sat across from him. "You don't have to do this alone." A faint smile, tired but grateful, touched his face. "Your being here makes this possible." She studied him carefully. His anxiety wasn't subtle. His shoulders were tight, his eyes heavy, his movements deliberate. Every breath seemed purposeful, like he had to remind his body to keep going. "This press conference," he whispered, "is going to destroy my reputation." "Yes," she said honestly, "it will. My company, my position, everything I built." His voice thinned. "Gone." "I know." A long silence stretched between them. He looked down at the papers again, as if searching for courage hidden between the lines. Esther reached out and rested her hand gently on his wrist. "Tyrese, listen to me." He lifted his eyes slowly. "Courage isn't about feeling ready," she said. "Courage is doing the right thing, even when it terrifies you." His breath hitched, and he blinked hard. "I'm terrified, Esther, not of losing the money or the status, but of facing the consequences I should have faced years ago. I'm terrified of reliving it all in front of cameras, in front of the world." She nodded gently. "Fear means you're human, but choosing truth means you're growing." He sat back slightly, absorbing her words. "You know," she continued, "my father used to tell me something. He said, 'Strength isn't proven in peaceful seasons. It's proven when the storm hits and you don't run.'" Tyrese closed his eyes briefly, moved by the words he once contributed to tarnishing. "I wish I had met him with honesty instead of accident." "You're choosing honesty now," she whispered. "It won't erase the past, but it will show who you're choosing to be moving forward." He opened his eyes again, raw emotion swimming in them. "Thane, thank you for staying." She didn't smile. "Not yet. I'm here because running won't fix anything, and because I want to see you finish what you started." He nodded, though his anxiety still hovered like a shadow over his expression. He picked up the final sheet of paper, the one summarizing his personal involvement. His hand shook again, and the page rustled softly. "Tell me what scares you the most," she said gently. He hesitated, then whispered, "That your father will never know how deeply I regret what happened. That he'll never hear me apologize in person." Esther breathed in slowly. "You can still honor him through your actions. Today is part of that." Tyrese lowered the paper and looked directly at her. "What scares you today?" She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes softened, and she finally said, "That once all this becomes public, we won't recognize the versions of ourselves standing on the other side." His expression shifted, fear mixed with something longing, something fragile. No matter what happens, I'll carry your strength with me." She held his gaze. "And I'll carry your truth. But we need to be prepared. Once you step on that stage, the world will judge everything you say." "I'm ready to face them," he said quietly, "as long as I'm not facing them alone." She nodded. "Then let's get ready." For the next hour, they organized documents, discussed the order of his statements, practiced how he would respond to aggressive questions, and prepared themselves for backlash from powerful figures he was about to expose. Tyrese's anxiety didn't disappear, but the more he prepared, the steadier he became. Esther watched the shift with quiet admiration. This wasn't the fearful man she met in the diner weeks ago. This was someone transforming, slowly, painfully, but deliberately. When they finally stepped outside to leave for the conference, Esther paused on the porch. "Tyrese," he turned, "if you feel your voice shaking, look at me." He nodded gently. "Will, and if fear tries to swallow you, remember why you're doing this." "I remember," he whispered. "Your father and you." They shared a long, steady moment, a silent agreement that whatever storm awaited them, they would face it with truth instead of fear. Their steps forward were slow, but united. The world was waiting. So was the price of truth. The press conference was held in a modest community auditorium on the outskirts of town. Neutral ground, far from corporate buildings, far from Tyrese's world of privilege, and far from the polished stages where he once delivered flawless speeches. Today, no glossy backdrop waited behind him. No assistants adjusted microphones. No photographers angled for flattering shots. This was not a moment of prestige. It was a moment of accountability. When Tyrese and Esther stepped out of the car, flashes burst instantly. Voices rose in chaotic waves. Reporters pressed forward, shouting questions that sliced through the morning air. "Mr. Tyrese, is it true you're about to admit wrongdoing? Did your company hide the environmental reports? Are you resigning? Who else is involved?" Tyrese paused at the bottom of the steps, feeling the weight of every sound hit him at once. His chest tightened, his breath shortened. Esther glanced at him, reading the anxiety rushing through his posture. "Look at me," she whispered. He did. "You're not the same man who stayed silent back then," she reminded him softly. "You're different now. Step forward as the person you're choosing to be." He inhaled slowly, grounding himself in her steady gaze. Then he turned and walked toward the stage. Inside the auditorium, dozens of cameras lined the back wall. Rows of chairs filled with journalists, community members, and employees sat waiting with sharpened attention. An uneasy hush fell as Tyrese approached the podium. Esther took her place offstage, out of the spotlight, but close enough for him to see. She folded her hands, her heart steady but heavy. She didn't know exactly how she felt. Proud, anxious, wounded, hopeful, a storm of emotion she hadn't yet learned how to name. Tyrese gripped the edges of the podium. For a moment, he simply breathed. The microphone picked up the soft tremor in his breath. The audience watched, sensing something irreversible was about to occur. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice low but firm. "I'm here today to tell the truth, not the version written by attorneys, not the one shaped by corporate influence, But the truth I should have spoken years ago. Reporters leaned forward. Tyrese continued. Several years back, I participated in a project designed to bring economic development to a rural Alabama community. On paper, it looked beneficial. But in reality, it harmed the very people it claimed to help. A murmur rippled through the room. I trusted internal reports that were manipulated. I defended decisions that were unethical. I remained silent while others suffered because of choices that traced back to my desk. He paused, steadying himself. One person in particular was punished for trying to expose what happened. A man who spoke the truth and was labeled a problem. A man who faced financial damage, emotional strain, and public humiliation. Esther felt her heart begin to pound. Her fingers tightened around each other. That man, Tyrese said, voice thickening, was innocent, and he was silenced so the company could preserve its image. Journalists scribbled faster. Cameras zoomed in. The first, Tyrese exhaled shakily, stood by, and allowed it. The silence in the auditorium felt heavy enough to press against the walls. I can't undo the past, he continued, but I can expose every person who contributed to that injustice. He lifted a stack of documents. These are internal emails, contracts, environmental assessments, and financial reports that were hidden from the public. They prove who benefited, who lied, and who silenced the truth. The crowd erupted in sudden noise. Questions, shouts, flashes. Tyrese raised a hand gently, signaling for calm. I accept full responsibility for my part, and effective immediately, I am resigning from every position associated with the company. My holdings will be released. My title will be relinquished. My influence will be surrendered. Gasps broke out across the room. Esther felt her breath catch, not out of shock, but out of witnessing the weight of sacrifice laid bare. She watched him closely, her emotions tangled. Seeing him lose everything because of a truth connected to her father carved deeper lines across her heart. Tyrese continued, voice steady, despite the storm unfolding around him. I expect consequences, legal, financial, personal, and I will face them all without resistance. What matters most is that the people harmed, especially the man wrongfully blamed, are finally acknowledged. His next words trembled. I cannot speak to him directly anymore, but I hope this act honors what he endured. Reporters fired questions. Who else was involved? Was the board aware? Will criminal charges follow? Why did you stay silent until now? Tyrese answered each one with clarity, naming executives, exposing cover-ups, explaining the systemic manipulation behind the scenes. Every truth he released chipped away at the empire he once belonged to. His reputation crumbled in real time, but his integrity rose in its place. After nearly an hour, the final question came, Mr. Tyrese, why now? Why choose to speak today? He turned his head toward Esther. Their eyes met across the distance, and something silent passed between them. Pain, courage, loyalty, and the fragile beginning of healing. I spoke today, he said softly into the microphone, because silence finally became more unbearable than accountability. The room fell silent again. He stepped back from the podium. If done, everything he built had fallen by his own choosing. And for the first time, Esther saw a version of him that felt complete, not perfect, not unscarred, but whole. The auditorium emptied slowly, leaving behind a fading hum of scattered voices and shuffling equipment. Reporters gathered their notes. Camera crews packed up their stands. The shock of Tyrese's confession still lingered in the air like a heavy mist that refused to lift. The world outside had already begun reacting, social media exploding with clips, headlines forming in real time, news anchors preparing their segments. But inside the quiet hall, the noise felt distant. Tyrese stepped off the stage with shoulders lowered, not from defeat, but from release. The truth had been locked inside him for years, poisoning him from the inside out. Now, as he walked toward Esther, something about his posture looked different. Weaker in some ways, stronger in others. Esther stood near the side wall, hands clasped lightly, watching him with an expression she couldn't quite name. It wasn't the fury she felt the night he confessed. It wasn't the pain of betrayal. It wasn't forgiveness yet. But it was something real, something growing. When he reached her, he didn't speak at first. He simply stood still, giving her space to choose whether to close the distance or widen it. She chose neither. Instead, she took a slow breath and said, "You did it." His voice came out soft. "I did. How do you feel?" He let out a breath that sounded like years of weight leaving his body. "Like I finally stepped out of a prison I helped build." Esther nodded gently. It showed. He swallowed. Did I disappoint you in any way?" "No," she said honestly. "You didn't." She paused. "It hurt to watch, but it was also the first time I saw you stand fully in the truth without hiding from it." He lowered his eyes. "Thank you for being there. I don't know if I would have made it through without seeing you in the corner." She shifted slightly. "I told you I wouldn't let you face it alone." He nodded, quiet and grateful. Outside the doors, the noise began rising again. Reporters waited for post statements. News vans lined the street. Cars slowed as people tried to catch a glimpse of the man who had taken down his own empire. But for the moment, neither Tyrese nor Esther cared about the world beyond the walls. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. She exhaled, letting the uncertainty settle without fear. "Now, we walk out of here, together, and we face whatever comes." He looked at her, eyes filled with something raw and hopeful. "You still want me beside you after everything unraveled today?" "I didn't say it would be easy," she replied softly. "But I didn't come here to abandon you after the hardest part." He stepped closer, careful, respectful. "Esther, I know I have caused you pain that may take years to process. I don't expect you to forget any of it. I won't, she said, truthfully, but I saw the man you were today. And he's not the same man who once ran from guilt. He swallowed hard. I want to be better. Truly. A long silence filled the room. Quiet, steady, without demand. Finally, Esther reached for his hand. The touch was soft, but sincere. Not a full restoration, not a declaration of romance reborn, but a beginning, a step, a choice. When their fingers linked, Tyrese's breath caught softly, as if the gesture alone anchored him. "Ready?" she asked. "Only if you're beside me." They walked toward the exit, hand in hand, stepping into a sea of flashing lights and loud questions. Voices swarmed instantly, shouting his name, demanding statements, calling out theories. But Esther squeezed his hand, and he stayed grounded. He faced the cameras briefly, not to answer questions, but to acknowledge the moment. Then, with Esther guiding him through the chaos, they moved through the crowd. Together, once they reached the car, the doors closed, muting the noise outside. Silence settled around them again, softer this time, almost peaceful. Esther turned toward him. "You lost everything today." "Not everything," he whispered, looking at her. She held his gaze. "We're not perfect. We're not healed. But we're trying." He nodded. "And trying is enough for me." She breathed slowly, letting her heart settle into a rhythm that felt strangely hopeful. "There's something I learned through all this," she said. "Not every love story is gentle. Not every truth is easy. But if two people are willing to grow through the consequences, something new can rise from the damage." He listened with silent reverence. She continued, voice firm yet tender. "People think love is proven in peaceful seasons, but real love, it's proven when you walk through the fire and still choose each other afterward." He felt his chest tighten, not with guilt this time, but with gratitude. "Esther, I'll spend the rest of my life honoring that choice." The car drove away from the chaos, leaving the auditorium behind. They didn't know what storms waited ahead: legal battles, public backlash, emotional rebuilding. But they weren't walking into it alone. They were walking into it with truth, with courage, with each other. Esther looked out the window, then whispered the final truth of their journey. Real love doesn't avoid the fire. It survives it.